Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope this is on a Wednesday. This is not yet a Friday, Ross. So I hope it's not a hump day of the week. But welcome again to SICS Seminar Series. And today we have Ross, or Dr. Roslyn Cox, as our speaker. My name is Anita Dewi. I'm a lecturer in information studies at the school, and I will be helping Ross with navigating and pretty much timekeeping, I think, of this session. But before I start, I'd like to acknowledge the country first. So we would like to acknowledge the Wiradjuri, Ngunnawal, Gundungurra, and Biripi peoples of Australia, who are the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which Charlestone's campuses are located, and pay respect to the elders, both past and present. And although we all know Ross, so there's no need for introduction, but I'd like to just give a little bit of a blurb about Ross. So the title of her talk today is The Power of Private, Analyzing the Motivations and Identity of Personal, Non-Government, Pro-Immunization, I can't even talk today, voices on social media. So Ross is a lecturer in the School in Communication at Charlestown University. Her doctoral thesis investigated the way social media environments can foster or easily trigger crisis events, a phenomenon known as paracrisis. Her thesis builds on the work of Coombs and Holliday, I hope I pronounced their names correctly, offering a model of paracrisis and further exploring the concept through the case study of immunization paracrisis. Without further ado, the microphone is yours, Ross.
Thanks, Anita. Thanks very much. And thanks, everybody, for your time today. I'm just going to share my screen and make sure that all works so that everybody can see these slides. So has that come up properly? Yep. Okay, yep. Wonderful. Excellent. So thanks, Anita. I'm sharing this afternoon a presentation on my analysis of a pro-immunisation messaging site and looking at the way pro-immunisation messaging and strategy happens on social media platforms. So by way of a little bit further background on me, I worked in 10 years in the early part of my career as a media relations person in health for New South Wales Health and also for Sydney Children's Hospital. So during that time, I worked very closely with epidemiologists and people from public health units, where we had to sort of do messaging and responses and manage media in relation to disease outbreaks and warnings. So it was this experience when I came to sort of study paracrisis, it became the most amazing case study for me to sort of go back in time in my own life and my own career and think about immunization and the challenges, I guess, for people, that are trying to support immunization in social media spaces and all the challenges that are inherent with that. So let me just make the slides go forward. Hopefully they will. There we go. That's it. So by way of a little bit more context to my work on immunization, I wanted to share some interesting information with you. The first of it being that the World Health Organization describes immunization as one of the greatest of all public health measures. And it's estimated that 3.5 to 5 million lives are saved every year through immunization against really terrible diseases like diphtheria and tetanus, pertussis, influenza, measles, and COVID, of course. But I'm also want to share with you, and I'm sure everybody is aware of this, that there is a small but influential and pretty highly active group of people, which we describe as anti-vaxxers, who peddle messaging and fear against immunisation. And recent estimates suggest that this audience is numbers in about 59 million people worldwide. So clearly 59 million people in the context of a worldwide population isn't very large, but it is a very active and very influential element of society, particularly in Western countries. So what we know about anti-vaxxers is that they're very proactive, and they've utilised very successfully the open nature of social media platforms to share their messages of fear and doubt, conspiracy thinking, etc., in relation to the role and the risks of immunisation. So just a little bit more context, I wanted to share this amazing cartoon with you to show and demonstrate that anti-vaccination sentiment is actually not a new thing. So this cartoon dates back to a period of time in 1796 when Edward Jenner, who was a young country doctor in the United Kingdom, first started doing his kind of investigations into how to protect people against smallpox. Smallpox at the time, 1796, was estimated to be one of the greatest scourges and most terrible and devastating diseases of the time. It's estimated that about 400,000 Europeans were killed by smallpox in the 18th century alone, which within the context of the world population at that time was enormous. So in Jenner's sort of work, he noticed a correlation and a source of protection against smallpox that was available to women who were milking cows, because what was happening was that they were contracting a different disease, a disease called cowpox, which is a sister disease of smallpox, if you like, but it was relatively mild and certainly survivable. So Jenner's hypothesis at the time was that if he could immunize, or as to use his terminology, inoculate people against cowpox, it would become a protection against smallpox. And of course, that is the amazing hypothesis that proved to be true. So what's interesting about that in terms of, I've just described the scientific breakthrough of all of that, but because of the nature of what immunization is, it frightened people, and it resulted in sort of satirical cartoons like the one that's on your screen right now, where we see pictures of a rather sort of smug-looking doctor in the middle there dispensing smallpox vaccinations, while we see pictures of people with, cow horns, cow eyes, tails, other types of deformities. So this was, in fact, the first fear-mongering against the whole immunisation initiative. And Jenner, in fact, received a lot of sort of backlash from ordinary folks and people, but also from the medical fraternity. And his initial articles describing the inoculation process, the early immunisation process, was actually rejected by the Royal Society in London. So he couldn't get his work published anywhere, and he self-published a very detailed booklet, complete with illustrations, etc., talking about inoculation and pushing back against dissenting forces. So that's enough about Jenner. Fast forward 200 years, some of these photographs will be familiar to us because they were taken during some of the COVID anti-vax protests and rallies that were held in Australian cities and also overseas. And what we see in some of these materials and some of these protests is a kind of coming together of groups, many of them with right-wing conspiracy kind of thinking, that are underpinned by a fear of government, a fear of authority, fear of loss of personal freedoms, etc. And this kind of pushback and arguments and challenges in promoting immunisation is kind of the focus of my work and my interest. So that's about it for context. So now what I wanted to talk about is is the way that anti-vax messaging is presented in social media forums. So you remember earlier on I spoke about an audience of 59 million for anti-vax information in online spaces. So what we know is that social media plays a very significant role in promoting anti-vaccination messaging, and approximately 75 to 80% of users are looking for health information online. Anti-vax sentiment has the largest and greatest presence in wealthy and highly educated democracies, which is very disturbing from my point of view. And there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation, which is very, very widespread on anti-vax sites. So the rhetoric behind them is very emotion-based arguments, us versus them, anti-government rhetoric. And the other aspect of it is these are very well organized, very sort of interactive sort of groups that are very good at networking, very good at lobbying, and very good at spreading that fear of immunization in whatever avenues are available to them. Okay, so what was I interested in knowing more about? What I was interested in knowing more about was how to combat this. So my work isn't really looking at the style and shape of anti-vax information. My work and this particular study was to look at how pro-immunization strategists and public health proponents can counteract the efforts of the anti-vax groups. So, and social media, yes, it's been used very successfully by our anti-vax groups, but it can equally be used strongly by pro-immunization advocates as well. So I wanted to find out what was appealing and how can social media be used to support pro-immunization messaging. So, and of course that draws on the nature of social media itself, which is where my communication background comes in. So social media scholars talk about the importance of dialogue, the benefits of the opportunity to share stories, to connect and engage. So how could that be used, and what would be something that I could look at in order to learn what the appeal was, what the nature was, how these environments can be used to advance the cause of immunization. So that was when I came across this particular site, Light for Riley, which is a Facebook site. It's an amazing sort of personal story, and you know you can go and have a look at that if you're interested at some point. But it was set up by the parents of Riley Hughes, a little baby in Western Australia who died from whooping cough in March 2015 when he was actually too young to be immunized. So it was established by his parents, Catherine and Greg Hughes. And what's interesting from a communication point of view is it's not a government initiative. So we can find all kinds of information about immunization, when you should get your measles shots, all of those kinds of things from bodies like the National Health and Medical Research Council, from state government departments, state government organizations, public health organizations, from medical bodies, all of those kinds of things. But what's interesting about Light for Riley is that it's a personal private initiative of a family, a bereaved family who lost their son. So what's intriguing about it, and what I learned through my analysis, is that it's a very sort of highly interactive sort of Facebook site, just like any other kind of Facebook site that you might be a member of yourselves. It's full of posts and replies, and it has a lot of followers. And so my study was to look at that site and find out what that was all about, and to see if there were learnings and things that could be identified from analysing through discourse analysis the Light for Riley site. So what I did, I used G and G's approach to discourse analysis, which involved using building tools and building tasks, is what he describes the two layers of discourse analysis following his methodology. So discourse analysis is all about looking at identity in all its complexity. In all its complexity. So we're trying to find out not what people say, but who they are as people, what they believe in, some knowledge of the experiences that they've had. And it helps us to better understand through this analysis of writing and posting how information can be used to persuade or motivate, change the opinions of others. So within the building tools framework, I used certain, because you get to choose what you want to do. So I chose situated meaning, figured worlds, and big C conversations. And within the building task framework, which is, the second part of the process, I looked at identities, relationships, politics, and connections in order to look at my data and find out what it revealed. So what did I learn? I learned quite a lot about the identity, relationships, and connections of the people that were posting in the Light for Riley site. So it's not just information about the Hughes family themselves, although they certainly share their fears for the safety of children. They share information about, there's a lot of praise for Catherine and Greg Hughes about being brave enough to go public and share their very sad story in order to help others. Within the politics and big C conversations lens, it was revealed that there was, a huge amount of support for the Hughes family, which isn't kind of surprising, because the other thing I should share with you is that this site is kind of an edited site, so that it is subject to attack from anti-vax advocates who come in there and post their stuff and whatever. So it is an edited site that is managed by Catherine and Greg Hughes. But some of it's a bit nasty. Some of it's a bit horrible, because the anti-vaxxers do attack them on a personal front, and they cast aspersions on their motives for running the Light for Riley site. They make statements that Riley Hughes didn't die from pertussis. He died from, something or other else, vaccine injury, all kinds of things that are just not factual in any sense. So that is revealed very strongly through an analysis of discourse analysis of Light for Riley too. And the other thing that's really interesting is that there's quite a startling amount of medical information. Now, Greg and Catherine Hughes are lay people. They're not doctors. They don't have medical backgrounds. They're not nurses or immunizers or anything like that, but they are very well informed. And I guess through their life experiences and their decision to set up this site, they've accumulated quite an impressive amount of medical information and knowledge about immunization and what it's all about. In terms of identities and connections, it's very interesting to find that there's, parents and grandparents, doctors, and quite a lot of medical people that will come and post in Light for Riley. So they all will add to the dialogue, and they reply to things, they support things. Within the big C conversations lens, there's a lot of emotion, which replicates some of the emotion and things that we see in anti-vax spaces as well. So lots of messages of gratitude for the Light for Riley initiative and its work in educating and I guess making the case for immunisation. But the other thing that's really intriguing from a communication point of view is that it is in terms of connections, where many people posting there are wanting to tell their own stories of suffering. So there's posts from people who have also lost children to whooping cough, like Riley. There's a very interesting post from a mother who lost her child to SSPE, which is a complication of contracting measles. I don't know if people know about SSPE, but it's a disease that it's kind of like a secondary disease that a young person will get at the age of sort of 14 or sometimes a little bit younger if they've contracted measles as a baby, and it's degenerative and ultimately fatal. So there's posts from people like that. Other things learned from looking at the Light for Riley sites through looking at the lens of politics and Big C conversations, they talk a lot about the challenges of supporting immunisation and dealing with the fact that, you know, there's this segment of anti-vaxxers that can never be reached. They are not people for whom scientific evidence, arguments, knowledge has any impact. They can't be reached on that front. So that's part of the challenge there. And you'll see in this little screen grab that I've got up there, it's a piece from Greg Hughes talking about you know, an experience that he had where anti-vaxxers were mocking his dead son and telling lies about he and his wife Catherine and the Light for Riley initiative. Within the relationships, connections, figured worlds, there's also apparent more what I would call neutral parents. So people who are going to that site to find out information. So maybe they are people that we would describe as vaccine hesitant. So people who have read things online or had people, you know, individuals say things to them that have increased their fears about the safety or value of immunization. And the other part that was revealed through my analysis, through looking at Big C conversations, is the sort of non-judgment, I would describe it as the non-judgmental support and advice for those that are seeking information. So one of the things that Catherine Hughes talks about is that you can't convince people and allay people's fears if you're shouting at them or arguing with them or not, or belittling them in some ways, using negative words for them or categorizing them in a negative way. And that's another piece that was revealed through looking at the discourse in the site. So I'm just looking at the time, Anita. This is going to be a record for these presentations. I'm going to be done in half an hour. So to summarize, in looking at what people are finding in the Light for Riley site and what's the appeal of this site and what was revealed, you know, in looking in a broad context of the information, the data, and what it revealed. So what it revealed is that Light for Riley as a site, a pro-immunisation site, contains authentic, very highly personalised voices, where people are looking to go to an environment where they can trust the information that they're getting, where it's done in a respectful way, where they can exchange, add their comments, respond to things. And this is quite different from the information environments, immunisation information environments that they might find as managed through government organisations. So they're also looking for an opportunity to share their own stories and to connect with other parents or people that have had similar stories of fear and loss. They're reaching out to Catherine and Greg Hughes because they are acknowledging the efforts and sacrifices of these parents, and what the Light for Riley initiative is endeavouring to do. And what they're also trying to do is to confirm what immunisation does and how it protects people, especially children. So it's very much an environment that reflects social media styled information. So it's very much dialogic, and it's this opportunity to come together, to connect, to share life experiences, and to share people's knowledge about immunisation. So are there any lessons on public health messaging on immunisation that we can learn through this particular analysis? And yes, there are. What is revealed is, and the context that I outlined at the start of is it's an enormous challenge to fight against and push back against the arguments of anti-vaxxers. 59 million people online may not sound like an awful lot, but what we saw through COVID and through the protests, the kinds of arguments that were being marshaled by anti-vaxxers, all of those kinds of things reveal that this is quite a sophisticated problem and a very challenging problem, and one that is unlikely to go away, and one where the nature of social media platforms, and we've seen this in the Musk era of Twitter, now X, is that social media platforms are kind of losing the battle to take down disinformation and misinformation on their platforms. So it's incredibly challenging, and this is unlikely to be changing anytime soon. So what social media sites like Light for Riley can do through these authentic and highly personalized stories is to kind of counteract that in some ways, and to provide opportunities for people seeking information that where they can talk to others, talk to other parents, and receive, I guess, some more support and understanding for any concerns that they might have. So Light for Riley certainly offers a chance to connect, to engage, to share, but more importantly, to be heard and to be known. And this is the critical outcome from my analysis, is people are reaching out. One of the great appeals of social media is to be heard and to be known, and to connect in that way. Other things, people, I've said here, people are tricky. We're not empty vessels. So we're not always happy to accept and swallow information. And gosh, I'm speaking to a group of academics. You know, that's our stock in trade. We want to know the reasons, and we want to have things proved to us. So in order to be in an environment where people can be trusting of the information that's being shared, that requires a lot of things. And one of the critical things that does involve is engagement. So yes, so the 200-year history of controversy and resistance to immunization, it continues on in different formats. And I often think about Edward Jenner and what he might think about what's going on with immunization in 2023. But the challenges to immunization continue, and in different forms. And sadly, despite a wealth of scientific evidence, that is unlikely to change. So final thoughts. I describe social media as both a tool and a weapon. And in this context, it really needs to be understood that both of these things happen simultaneously in trying to use social media platforms to support immunization messaging. So there's an enormous challenge for public health authorities in the open environment of social media to counteract what's wrong and inaccurate, and try and bring forward accurate information, authentic stories, engaging environments in which to promote the immunization cause. So one of the things that my study highlighted is that it's really important to establish environments where there can be engagement, where there can be dialogue, where there can be connection, which is not judgmental, not blaming, not categorizing and embarrassing people, but but moving beyond their fears in order to talk to them properly and respectfully about the value of immunization. And I think it's just a really an amazing initiative of just ordinary people who, through their own tragedy and suffering and loss, have taken upon themselves to advance immunization and an understanding of it in a really proactive way. So that's it. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing. Give the screen back to
Thank you, Ross, and
people.
thanks for stopping sharing so we can see each other. Is there any question, comment for us? And yes, that was record breaking, half an hour.
That's good. It's a busy time of year, I know. We're all marking and I don't know, looking forward to the middle of October. I know I am.
Yeah, we have any I can see your hands up.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, I think it's really interesting and kind of important and sad, your whole topic here, very important. As I understand it, social media or online is just after the maximum number of eyeballs. And the way to do that is through sensationalism. So that if you can say something really extreme about vaccine danger, then you're going to get a whole lot more eyeballs than if you say something measured and calm. So, and then I guess on the other flip side, a little bit of what you're saying, their story is so horrendous that it can't help but be sensationalist. Well, it's not sensationalist, it just is extraordinary. So, of course, going to evoke a lot of emotion. So I just wondered if there's a category that you use for, drama or the.
This is the challenge, isn't it, Annie? And this is why a lot of scholars and people have said that anti-vax groups have been so much more successful, because it's better to say, this is going to kill you and this is going to harm you, and if you do that, your kid's going to die and it'll be on you. And they're quite unscrupulous. They're not letting evidence or rationality or whatever stand in the way of what they want to do. They want to promote fear, right? So that's an incredibly thing to try and counteract, because you want to, you can't, labels don't work. And it's funny, watching The Voice and the way things have panned out for the yes versus no case and what have you, it is incredibly challenging to be the party that has to, rise above the skullduggery and be frank, honest, scientific, truthful. That's not always the easy path to take, but I think what my work revealed is that you cannot win an argument when you label people and you shout at them, and you need to have the dialogue, the conversation in a respectful way. And that's really what my work has revealed in analyzing this site. It's quite unique, but you can't be down, you can't descend to that same kind of level of dishonesty and disinformation. And that means that, you've got to do it in a sort of higher angel kind of way, I guess. Yeah. I don't know if that really.
No, I mean, I'm completely agreeing with you. It's just sad that the higher angel way doesn't get the most eyeballs.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. But, one of the things that other scholars are looking at too is the importance of being in there. And like in a communication sense, you can't be influencing people or persuading people or educating people if you're not talking to people. And that's the other element of it too. So a lot of scholars are saying we've got to be much more active in social media environments than we currently are. Hence my decision to look at Light for Riley to say, well, here is a site that's trying to do this. What can we learn by looking at that could be perpetuated in other places? Because this is an Australian-based initiative. There's nothing comparative that I've been able to find that's happening in the US or anywhere else. There's nothing quite like it. So it is quite unique, and there's lessons to be learned from looking at it in a detailed kind of way. Yeah.
Thanks, Ross. Any other question for Ross? Richard.
Hi, Rose. Thanks very much for this talk, and very interesting. I noticed because it's very, very intriguing, and also in somehow it's very contentious research, right? Yeah, especially you're combining both two, immunization and also social media. I really like the term para-crisis, because social media is, on one side is instant, that's why we have this global pandemic of everything, right?
Yes.
And on the other side is what is the information is accessible to everyone, whether it's your layperson or experts. So that's a blessing, also a curse. Right.
Yes.
Okay. So that's very, 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 very hard to manage. So the previous way is whether it's collective, mentality, like authority, rely on authority, or rely on a democratic manner. Well, it's hard to reconcile, really. But my focus probably is on your methodology, because I noticed you use James Porges' discourse analysis, right?
Yes.
It's a mix of the big and small J's, right?
Yes.
Okay. And any sort of discourse analysis, well, regardless, its traditions, in which it's they all need to begin with context.
Yes.
That's the foundation or the starting point of any sort of analysis.
Yes.
So I was very curious about you mentioned about this kind of anti-vax movement.
Yes.
At the very beginning, the early 19th century, back to the Edward Jenner's case.
Yes. Yes.
That was different when the call box was first introduced.
Yes.
Then there's a pre-COVID anti-vax movements. In both eras, anti-vax was kind of fringe group, marginalized, right? But I noticed, you're aware during COVID and also post-COVID, it's anti-vax somehow moving from fringe group to sort of mainstream.
Yeah.
If you look at the Facebook or X or Rumble or YouTube,
Yeah.
Right. So, and of course, this the voice of referendum is another manifestation of a similar movement, right? So what's your take on the three context of anti-vax, American social, where is a culture of situation or culture of what's that word? About the specific social, cultural, social, political context, revolving around these three states. Yeah.
About the nature of the anti-vax movement, do you mean, in a specific sense?
It did three different eras. The first and the pre-COVID and the latest one. Yeah.
I'll just be up front, Richard. I've read a lot about anti-vax stuff. I haven't done any of my own work looking at, the precise. I haven't done equivalent analysis of anti-vax sites in the way that I've done the Light for Riley one. But I do think from everything that I've read, that other scholars have looked at, is that COVID has given energy and force to anti-vax movements, and it's created a bit of momentum and also brought other sort of maybe anti-government groups and things together. You know, like it's quite, those rallies were those anti-vax rallies in Melbourne during shutdown and whatever, quite extraordinary to me to witness, as I'm sure they were for everybody, right? Like we're in the middle of, you know, a public health crisis where people are dying. And we have to remember, like I was talking to my students about this the other day, we have to remember there was a time when there was no protection. There was no protection, and, you know, some people died, others didn't, but it was very sort of arbitrary as to whether you would get COVID and survive it. So to see people, thousands of them, no masks, marching, shouting, being in a big group, protesting against lockdowns, which at the time was the only things that we had within our arsenal to protect people from a terrible, you know, a terrible outcome, or the potential of a terrible outcome. So I think that in looking at those three periods that you mentioned, you know, like back 200 years ago, early days of immunization, pre-COVID, now in the post-COVID period, I feel that that this work and this understanding of what to do to give people confidence in immunization, to let them be educated and aware about, you know, I mean, there are some risks with immunization, but on balance, it's the scientific evidence is unequivocal. It saves lives. It saves 3.5 to 5 million lives every year. So it's challenging. And I actually think for pro-immunization strategists, it's never been more important to be able to be better at this, to be using social media in the ways that we need to in order to support people and reduce vaccine hesitance. And this is what the World Health Organization has said, that vaccine hesitance and fear of vaccination is one of the top 10 world health threats. So they're not saying it's Ebola, they're not saying it's a particular disease, they're saying fear of immunization is one of the top 10 risks to keeping people safe and preserving their lives. And I think that in and of itself shows what the stakes are here and how important it is for pro-immunization strategists to be much, much better at reaching out to people, creating that dialogue, creating these environments and utilizing these platforms to better advance the pro-immunization message. I don't know if that answers your question. I hope it does.
Yes, really complex, because I think that the first in the earliest era, when Carl box was put forward as an idea, there was certain uncertainty, so that definitely there was backlash from the mainstream society, right? So the medical professional became in the minority.
Yeah,
so we has to go hiding, right? And the second phase is different because the efficacy of vaccines has been, particularly in terms of measles, that has been established. So
yes.
Personally, you know, I came from China, the small village. Both my parents were illiterate.
Yes.
And but when I received my first, still cow, it was not mandatory. And when we introduced it to village people, there's no resistance, so no hesitance whatsoever. We just happily accepted that one.
Yes.
Right.
And this is what.
Yes, the third wave. I mean, come to COVID is very different because I'm not sure, because COVID is a different beast because it's an evolving situation, right?
Yeah.
And so then we have the public health authority. Okay, because as teachers, you know, when let's compare the Western and Oriental. In Oriental, we assume that kind of collective, authoritative voice, teachers say, "I know everything."
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And in Western society, we say, because the democracy and it's a free society, we say, if teachers don't know, I say, I don't know. I don't have answer. We'll find out.
Yeah.
That kind of a shared
Yeah.
empathy, right, with students. So I'm just as you as analogy, because that's probably another way.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
about a personal observation.
I think it's also really, I mean, the context of the difference between, say, America and Australia, where it really, I mean, and then you look at the anti-vaccine, which was just terrifying. But then you see that Dan Andrews got a landslide when he was re-elected. He was re-elected by a landslide. So that's really the ultimate poll, right? That's the poll that says that the vast majority of people, like 85% of people, were happy being locked down, were happy with the...
Well, they understood why. They understood what was at risk, and they were prepared to sacrifice. Like, did you have friends in Melbourne during lockdown? I did, and I had some students too. And every time I would speak to them on Zoom when we were doing our classes and whatever, I'd say, thank you. I'd start my classes like pointing out the ones that I knew that were in Melbourne and saying to them, thank you for all that you're doing, for the sacrifices that you're making to try and protect all of us. And I think that's, you know, we've lived through this extraordinary moment in time. And Richard's right. Like it's this whole issue of, you know, how do you, you know, where does vaccine hesitance come from? Why is it perpetuated? What is it about this message that people are resonating with? And then what can we do? And what are some approaches that are currently being taken to try and push back against that? But it's a challenge for everybody. And I'm not a medical person. I've just been around medical people a lot and worked with them a lot. And one of the things that medicos have said to me many, many times is that immunization is a victim of its own success, because in our lifetime, I actually happen to know somebody, a contemporary of mine, who was one of the last people in Australia to contract polio. But we haven't seen masses of people in iron lungs, like, you know, but they were.
The grandparents' generation.
That's right. So from the 30s, from Roosevelt's time as a US president who had polio and couldn't walk, people have kind of forgotten. And, you know, pertussis kills babies. Like Riley Hughes died because somebody was wandering around with pertussis, you know, infected that kid and that little baby when he was too young to be immunized, and then that was it. And you know, do you think that happens.
The ABC in the background, like, you know, I got all my facts through CoronaCast, you know,
it's great. Wasn't it great?
Yeah. Rose, on this point, actually, I find really
there. So if you're at least on the website saying, here's a link to CoronaCast, and if that exists, you can't maybe get everyone to watch it, but if you're in a free world, you can link them to an alternative, sensible website.
Yes.
That's a hugely significant thing that they didn't have so much in America, where the CDC is you know.
Yes, but you also, the other thing, Annie, too, is that you had a president who was saying, it's like the flu, and well, you could all wear masks, but I'm not going to. And by the way, you know, swallow an ounce of bleach while you're at it. That'll sort you out. And like, you know, so what happened in America was totally compounded by this president that they had at the time, who just, like, talk about disinformation. I mean, the guy was ignorant and he was very powerful. He lots of people listened to him, and he gave the most appalling advice that was contradictory to, you know, Anthony Fauci and the CDC, and, you know, like, it was unparalleled. Who could believe that that's what actually transpired in that country? And to this day, all this time later, that is still not really well understood amongst his a group of supporters or whatever. They still think that COVID was something terrible foisted on them, and it was an overreaction, and la 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 la. So you know, it's an incredible period of time to be around, to witness this, and to try and look at it as a communication person or as an academic, to kind of see what has gone on here and how is it possible that you know, truth and science are not the things that we rely on. And given all of that, you know, how do you use communication and strategy to kind of counteract that? It's an enormous challenge. Yeah.
Richard, yeah.
Rose, did you have a chance to talk to the Facebook page creator and Riley's parents?
I didn't until I'd finished my work, because I wanted to keep like proper distance from that while I was doing my analysis. But after I finished my thesis, and it was, sorry, there's a very loud mowing up there. I don't know if you can still hear me. I did reach out to them, and I shared a copy of my thesis with them afterwards, and I told them about it because you know, you know, I want to share some information. I thought it was important to sort of do that. So I have exchanged emails with Catherine Hughes now, but I didn't prior to the thing. I just you know, did my analysis and, you know, accessed their material and was looking at it. Yeah.
Because I noticed their son, Riley, contacted the disease. That was in 2016, right?
The baby
2015.
Yes,
yeah,
2015.
Because my younger son was born in RPA in Sydney, and we took all the vaccines, you know.
Yeah.
No person asked.
Yeah.
So I just wondering why that happened, you know, because supposedly it should be a basket of a,
no, they weren't anti-vaccine, but there's you do immunizations at a month, 2 months, 6 months. There's a regime that's set by the National Health and Medical Research Council, and of course he contracted pertussis, whooping cough, you know, a week or so before he died. So he died at age 32 days. But he contracted the disease a few, you know, the week or so before that. So, but this is the thing, like in the post-COVID era, we say the words herd immunity. We all know what that means, right? It means that if we choose not to immunize ourselves, we are potential you know, vectors, if you like, of putting the disease out in the world. So if we haven't immunized ourselves or our families or whatever, then we become sort of like hosts, if you like, and potential vectors of disease. So the more people that immunize, the less that there is that disease exists out in the world. And, you know, as an adult, you can survive whooping cough, but as a baby, you kind of can't. It's just, it's shocking. And same so for measles and other sorts of diseases. So, yeah, it's one of those things. I don't know. It's this thing where you are doing what's right for others as much as for yourself, you know. And interestingly enough, during my time when I was working on all of this, you know, you talk about immunization to lots of people, and there's a protocol now where if you're a grandparent or even you know, about to have a baby yourself, they do boosters of whooping cough for anybody that comes into contact with newborn babies. And that's a way of, you know, making sure that you don't accidentally pass on something like that to a baby that's too small to be safe, mixing with others. So one of the things that Catherine and Greg Hughes lobbied for was 3rd trimester boosters for pregnant women, for pertussis, for whooping cough. And that's an initiative that they really push for, because if Riley had been, you know, breastfed by his mother, who had you know, a very strong immunity to whooping cough, that might have given him a bit more protection. So that kind of thing is you know, a new protocol with immunization that's come in as a result of Riley Hughes's death, which is very interesting as well. Gosh, I didn't talk for long, but the questions went well.
It's been a long discussion. It's really great, Ross. It's really great. Look, we've got 4 minutes left. I'm not quite sure if
Can I just say
Yeah.
something? I've just looked up on the screen and seen the most magic person in my life, my beautiful supervisor, Jill Fenton Taylor. I just want to say hi to Jill. I didn't know you were coming, so I just want to acknowledge Jill, who, you know, she's the greatest person in the whole world and my wonderful doctoral supervisor. And thank you for coming, Jill, today.
Thanks, Jill. Oh well, yeah, it's really great and great discussion as well. You did not talk over 30 minutes.
Just
but
as
you
well.
did talk for more than 30 minutes, so that was great. Yeah, just a couple of minutes left, so regretfully, I think it's time to close the session today. Next month's session is going to be again on one of the Wednesdays in October, 12 to 1. I mean, we actually have our speaker here in this room. So Simon will be talking next month. Don't look surprised. You know this. You knew this.
Fair enough.
Yep. All right. Okay. Well, anyway, thank you again for attending, for being here and being involved in discussion and listening to the conversation as well. And looking forward to seeing you again in a month's time. Have a lovely rest of the day. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.